Welcome to Cracking the Cryptic, and today I'm just going to talk you through my solve, which I've already done, of today's Times Cryptic. It's a Friday, which I don't think tells us anything in advance about the puzzle. So here we go. This is me calling it up, and you can see from the cursor that's about to move. The cursor doesn't move, I'm just flicking around the grid at that point. Right. One across was fairly straightforward, partly because it's a dance, 3-3-3. And from a certain amount of crossword experience, I know that cha-cha-cha fits 3 men in line, each wanting last. Well, that's wanting in the sense of lacking. And if you take the word chap and have it lacking its last letter, you get cha. And so 3 of those gives you cha-cha-cha. 1 down was chased without the H. 2 down had an anagram of Ireland in an article. 3 down, let's just go back to that. 3 down was catch on handlebar, perhaps causing pain. The way I solved that was looking for a 9-letter word for pain beginning with H, and it occurred to me that that was heartache. Now, what's that got to do with catch on handlebar, perhaps? Well, it's a very neat use of handlebar as its other meaning as a moustache. And a moustache can be abbreviated to attach, T-A-C-H-E. So to catch can be to hear. If you catch something, you might hear it. And if you hear tash, you get heartache. So that was quite a neat construction for that clue. Then 4 down was a long anagram. 1 choir remains in disarray. Whatever happens is the definition. I kind of wanted come hell or, but obviously high water wouldn't fit as 1 extra word. And I eventually worked out come rain or shine was what the anagram was giving. I had a look at 5 down, where washing may be seen at every point. I was thinking all hands on deck. I couldn't quite see what that was. I could see it was probably going to be a pun about where you might see washing, but I couldn't work it out. 10 across, I had a go at cold solving this, and it was a surprise to me. Society shunned by musketeer in liberal European city. Well, society could be the letter S. So if that's shunned or ignored by a musketeer, well, there are basically 4 musketeers. The 3, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, all end in S. D'Artagnan doesn't have an S. So it's normally Athos if you see something about a musketeer, because the shortest word normally gets used the most. But in this case, we needed one of the other musketeers. Liberal can be L, European can be E. This clue's a kind of lesson in 1-letter abbreviations used in crosswords. And so it was in fact Aramis one had to take and put in L and E, and you get Laramie, which may be familiar to those who followed westerns, and I think it's a town in Wyoming, or every town in America is a city, so that's what it is. But it was a surprising musketeer, although a very limited field, and a surprising answer. Ernst was the surrealist, you get to know that. Now, 12 across was quite amusing as well. Far from keen. Well, what that means, the synonym you would think of for far from keen, the first one surely happens to be a 9-letter word beginning with R. So once I've thought of the word reluctant, then I need to justify it. We've got the crosswordese volunteers, TA, Territorial Army. But that leaves a Frenchman to find. And the Frenchman in a clue is very often either M for Monsieur, I'm not sure if the Times would allow just that as Frenchman, but other crosswords would, or René, R-E-N-E, is a very popular Frenchman and turns up in a lot of words, sometimes reversed. So you get used to seeing that. But in this clue, it's quite new. The Frenchman turns out to be Luc, L-U-C, which is a perfectly normal French name, probably more commonplace these days for men than René. And so if you put Luc, T-A, in rent, which is a breach, you get this word reluctant. Very easy from the definition, quite a bit harder from the wordplay, but I did figure that out as I was going along, and the surprise of seeing Luke was interesting. 13 across, trace, local, banished from China, for example. Well, local is often an inn or a tavern, or something like that. And from the letters I've got, the L and the C in the grid, I can see that trace is quite likely to be relic. But it did take me quite a moment to figure out that I could actually remove the slightly surprisingly used pub from a word to get relic. And that means that China, for example, is showing republic, which is absolutely fair enough. Quite a neat spot. Now, I couldn't see 14 across at this point. Composition using organ in church. Is it bliss? To be fair, I think I was a bit thrown by the capital letter on bliss. Bliss is obviously a composer, although I wouldn't know of what. But I think that capital letter stopped me reading it as a potential definition, which would have made this clue considerably easier. And I come back to that in a moment. And now I move on to 17 across, which, if we quite liked how heartache breaks down into... Oh no, look, I've gone... Sorry, don't do that yet. Go back up to the northeast corner. And I happen to know Paul Dirac, the English Nobel laureate, from meeting him in crosswords before. And then some of the other answers go in. What I will draw your attention to in a moment, though, is the clue for 17 across, which is quite amusing. I think before that, this answer at 13 down, sword beginning to tarnish beneath rising sea in French painting. Well, there's a lot going on there, but rising sea in French attracted my attention. I know that sea translates to mer in French, and if that's rising, then that gives us rem at the beginning of a word that might well mean painting. So that leads me to think of Rembrandt. You can have a Rembrandt just as much as you can have Rembrandt himself. And a sword can be a brand. And the beginning to tarnish is the letter T, so that's what's making up that answer there. Had a quick look at 16 across, tips to help all dodging 50% in tax. That's a very unusually constructed clue. All dodging 50% refers to the words tips to help, and each of those loses half of its length. So you get the TI from tips, T from to, and HE from help, making the tax, which is a tithe. The new look needing sash from Japan's capital is Nairobi. N, air, and obi. There's a good bit of crossword general knowledge. Somewhat wet was fairly clearly going to be moist. It's an I in most. The trap at 21 downs and noose. Now have a look at 17 across. If we liked, as I say, here Tash at 3 down giving heartache, this one's even more fun, I think. Staff instruction to leave something on plate. And the way you have to break down the clue there, something on plate is the definition, which is pretty vague. So the letters in the grid certainly help. But staff, to staff someone, can be to staff something up, can be to man it. And so that's man. And then instruction to leave is the rather brilliant get out. So when you put man, get out together, you get mange to, which is quite surprising, totally different pronunciation. And something on plate because it's food, obviously. So I love the fact that heartache can break down into here Tash and mange to into man, get out, which is quite amusing. Still couldn't do the bliss clue, which is a bit poor at this point. And in the end, I think I had to jump down to the bottom right here. Eventually, I noticed in 27 across, ageless monarch, good with soldiers in uniform. I've got an E at the beginning. And ageless is suggesting eternal or eternally, which would fit, but I couldn't make that work. And eventually I see that uniform could be even And if you put something in even, well, you could get evergreen, which does mean ageless. And there the monarch is ER, good is G, and soldiers are RE. So quite irritatingly, I wasn't getting many extra letters in 5 down. I've had that L for a while. The T and the E that I've now got from those across entries there is obviously giving me the, but that was always quite a likely word. And now an E at the end is not actually all that much help. So I've had to really think about the clue itself, where washing may be seen, and suddenly, I'm not desperately domestic, but suddenly it was obvious to me that washing can be seen all along the line, which is a phrase that can mean at every point. I might not have guessed that all along the line was a phrase actually in the dictionary, but it will be because they've used it in the puzzle. There's a bit of crossword knowledge. 23, flock seen aloft. I could only get that from the definition, I think, because it's E in skin, which is cover, which is a bit vague. But luckily I know that a gaggle of geese is on the ground and a skein of geese is in the air, which is a fascinating bit of trivia. So 25 across, I think, will be the last one I enter in the end. And I'm finding some trouble with most of these crosses. So eventually struggling with, can't even see what the definition is in 25 across. Struggling with 22 across, a flower ending in S. I could only think of lotus and I couldn't see why. But then finally I try these downs, and 15 downs are fairly straightforward. Anagram of sign lover. 16 down I couldn't see immediately, although I think I didn't just spend long enough thinking about it. Now I can see that ignorance fits in 14 across and potentially defines bliss from the saying. 18 across, lots regret voiced by terrar initially. Well, terrar initially has to be the T at the end of the answer. So we need regret voiced to go before that, and the whole answer to mean lot. I did think of sight, with a sigh being the regret being voiced, which is quite good. But lot meaning sight, well, you can have a whole sight of something, is a whole lot of them, but it didn't appeal a lot at this point. I didn't quite risk it until I had the final checking letter there. Now, 22 across, flower to put back in boozer that's refused husband. And this is lotus, and what's happening is you put back TO, so that becomes OT, in a boozer, and in this case that's not a pub, it's someone who boozes, which is a lush. And if that's been refused its husband, you get TO backwards in lus, and that gives you lotus. So lotus can go in at this point, then 16 down, it's terrifying. I've got enough letters and I'm suspecting the G, so that's nightmare. And it's just night without the K. And I'm not sure what the mare is actually. What's that? Mounted champion is knight. Oh, mounted just means put on a mare, and the champion is a knight. I hadn't seen that while solving. And then finally, 25 across, do I lie with another having embraced sex appeal? Sex appeal can be either SA or it, normally. So if that's part of the wordplay, then do I lie, or do maybe has to be the definition. And I lie with another, in this case, turns out to be I mate. If you put it in that, you get imitate. Now, how does that equal do? Well, it's kind of the showbiz expression, can you do Tony Blair, which means to imitate them. So that's the puzzle completed. Check the solution here to make sure it's all correct, which it is this time. Just a second over 5 minutes. I think problem, such as it was for me, was in the bottom right corner, where I should have seen what was going on in ignorance a bit quicker, and that would have led me into these. Should have had a look at the down clues for resolving a nightmare, which were reasonably straightforward. So I could possibly have taken half a minute off that time anyway. And that was today's solve. Quite an entertaining puzzle. I love the fact that these words, heartache and mange tout, can be split up into other things so neatly. There's some bit of general knowledge, things like the skein of geese and Laramie. I don't think anything very taxing in terms of general knowledge there. I normally say that, and I'm ignoring some ancient word. Ducket, I suppose, a little older, but hardly out of the normal run. Nice puzzle. So hope you've enjoyed that and got some benefit from it, and hope to see you again on Cracking the Cryptic sometime. Thanks for joining.